30,000 meters down on the ocean floor, another energy revolution is underway. Are we willing to repeat history? The largest living space on Earth lies in the dark oceans, and yet we know so little about it.
Now, you're planning to get what you call these polymetallic nodules off the seafloor.
Contained in our nodules are all the metals we need to power the green economy, such as electric vehicles.
This is a very big industry of the future. We have a lofty ambition.
The deep is home to countless unimaginable life forms. The nodules create a place to live for all sorts of organisms.
When you scratch the deep sea, and if we know that they grow to 1 to 10 million a year, there's no recovery. All the biodiversity will be lost forever.
We have this enormous deposit, 900 million tons of nodules.
You're studying on one of the most valuable assets in the world.
Right now, the authority is at a critical juncture.
The conflict of interest should be very carefully examined.
The reason why these mineral resources are at risk is because of bad governance. We are running against the clock.
We will need only one to produce 1.5 million tons.
Are there unknown species there? Of course there are. Are we going to kill some of them if they're sitting on our nodules? Yes, we will. Our study is to understand what is the impact of taking them away.
Wherever humanity makes a mark in the ocean, the entire system is affected in ways that we are only just beginning to comprehend. Who really owns the deep ocean? And who should benefit most from it?
Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Carolyn Talks. This is the podcast / YouTube channel where I, your host, Carolyn Hines, film critic and journalist, talk to film creators about around the world, about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And please forgive me for my hoarse voice. I've been traveling all over. I did Toronto International Film Festival, then Busan International Film Festival in Korea. So my voice is like talked out. But I'm so happy to be able to be joined by filmmaker Matthieu Rytz to talk about his documentary Deep Rising, which is about a topic very close to my heart because at one point in time, I wanted to be a marine biologist. And as you can see, my background is a picture of the ocean. I'm from the Caribbean. I'm from Barbados, so from the sea. We love the sea. So films that talk about conservation, and oceanography, and the environment and how to save the environment and protect the environment is very important to me. So I'm very happy to have Matthieu to talk about the film with me today. So thank you so much for joining me, Matthieu.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure.
So this film, it talks about something that I think I read about briefly, like maybe perhaps years ago, called Deep Sea Nodules. So Deep Sea Nodules are just deposits of what you would call it metals and like heavy metals in the bottom of the seafloor. And there's this exploration, this deep sea mining of these heavy metals, and they're being used, and people want to use them, to further technology and advance humanity. So for you, Matthieu, how did you first learn about the deep sea nodules and the exploration, the mining of these nodules?
So it started in 2018 when I first heard it, and it was just while I was finishing my previous film, Anote's Ark. And during this process, I shadowed the president of Kiribati, Anote Tong, for a few years, and is from this Pacific country, really in the middle of the Pacific, and they have this large ocean state basically. So they really kind of know what's happening down there as resources. So I was privileged enough, because doing this project with the head of states, to know some of the conversation what was happening at a very high level. And I started hearing about deep seabed mining in 2018. And that was quite interesting for me, the journey, because when I started the project, there were barely no information about it. No news. It was very kind of a totally undercover story, actually. and which is absolutely not the case today. It's quite interesting for me because it broke so many headlines, and now it's kind of getting really enforced into mainstream media. But I really embarked in a 6-year journey now, really trying to unveil this very complex story.
Yeah, it is very complex because the conversation of conservation versus advancement is very complicated because we as humans, we want to keep advancing as a society, as a people, and globally, but also on a micro scale as well. Micro meaning in our individual communities and then individual companies, and then it expands. But then we also have to realize, like, if we continue to destroy the planet, what is there to advance for? What is there to advance towards? And your film, I think, tackles that starting from a very micro way, from dealing with one particular aspect, and that is the deep sea mining of these nodules. But then also looking, this is just one form of mining, but then you're also saying there's this one thing, and it will have such a significant impact on our world, on the environment. And that's the thing, like, when you can think of things from a micro perspective, but you have to think of it in a larger perspective. You have to look at everything in 2020 vision. You have to have foresight. So when you were making this film, what was your initial goal with making this film? Because what you started out with would have been what you have ended up with, because you said it took 6 years. So when you first started this film, what was your vision of where you saw the film ending, and like perhaps where you saw things being versus the reality of where it is now?
So I really started the project with trying to be open-minded and really trying to understand, why on one end the industry was telling, investors and telling the people around them that it's a sustainable way to move away from fossil fuel, and on the other end, the conservation world was just like screaming on, how dangerous it can be and how we don't know nothing yet about the deep ocean. And so I was kind of in the middle of the debate with my heart for conservation, obviously. And my heart was really all the time around protecting the ocean. But as you just mentioned, with a very challenging issue we all have right now is to move away from fossil fuel and to find a sustainable future. So it's been a complex journey in a way that, if you talk about, I don't know, plastic in the ocean or bleaching coral, I mean, I think everyone agree that, we should keep the coral alive and not putting plastic in the ocean. And it's very hard to get with a counter argument saying like the reason why we should do it. So that's, to start with, was a very challenging journey for me, just unveiling all those truths. But fundamentally, I start following the money, and that was really when I opened the Pandora box, because I realized what was at stakes, and I realized that actually the player behind the door are some of the world's biggest extractive company and defense company. I mean, in the US, one of the driving force of it is Lockheed Martin. And I was like, why a defense company, the world's biggest defense company, is looking at getting those nodules out? They're not just doing this to get access to some metal or something bigger. And really it became quite clear that it's a geopolitics of energy, and that we are not, as we move away from fossil fuel, we're not changing paradigm. We're just not changing the way the world works as getting after finite resources, because it's where the global geopolitics can control access, get power, control energy. So it becomes this massive geopolitical story, and really realizing that and then I start looking into solutions. And I realized that there's actually a lot of way to produce energy without extracting finite resources. And that was really, for me, illuminating, like, give me really kind of a lot of hope. And and at the same time, I was in a process of being a bit scary about finding it a bit scary to see how much power and money is being invested into getting after finite resources.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Lockheed Martin, which is the world's biggest defense contractor. And because you talked about why would a defense contractor be interested in something like this, but then when you, as like I talked about the micro and the macro, but then a lot of it comes down to war, a lot of it comes down to power and politics, and a few people wanted to control everything and wanted to control everyone. And I'm using the example of micro. Like in Barbados, we have our electricity. A lot of our electricity is natural gas. When we cook mostly with natural gas, which is taken from the earth. So we don't have coal in the Caribbean. We don't have Barbados, because Barbados is a limestone island. So we use natural gas, but we also use solar energy. We have solar panels, which we use to heat our water. Some people do use it to generate electricity and to cook with and all of that. But the thing is you have a company, okay, you have solar panels, but you need a company to make these solar panels, and this company can make these solar panels, but it's only going to be limited with regards to with regards to the amount of money they can make, because you have most people be like, okay, we need natural gas, but we also need the electricity from what we call the Barbados Light and Power Company. They supply the electricity in the country, but then the people who make the solar panels is a private entity. So, there's still a power struggle with regards to just something like that in an island like the size of Barbados, 166 square miles. You still have these three providers of energy in the country still vying for basically supremacy, and saying who is the better one, which is the better option. And you have households that use all three. You have natural gas, electricity, and solar energy, but it's still these three companies vying for all of this. And then in a macro scale, you got all of these defense contractors. You have companies it's Tesla, who's mining for lithium, and and then there's companies that are mining like Samsung, and these companies mining for cobalt to power our cell phones. You can't just use a cell phone, but and it's okay, we need these things, but then it's do we really need them in the long run with regards to using cobalt? Like right now in the Congo, they're mining for cobalt, and that's creating a genocide because these people are enslaved. And we are thinking, and that's something that I'm very conflicted about. I'm I need my phone, I need my laptop.
Of course, but I think it's really to rethink the mix of energy and what we need where. You mentioned two things just here, a Tesla and a cell phone. The first Tesla actually was powered by cell phone batteries, the beta, and the first one they actually try, as a beta car. And it's the equivalent of 1,800 cell phone to power one Tesla. So, maybe we ask ourselves, how many cell phone we're going to use in an entire life? And it's not much. Even if you run to get every single Samsung, iPhone, whatever in the market, there's not going to be more than one or maximum two new models a year. So, you cannot burn the equivalent extract the equivalent of metal for just one Tesla. But that's not actually even the biggest problem. The biggest problem, and you mentioning solar panel, you need to store the energy. And why are they storing the energy? So the Tesla model is basically you build gigafactory. And the gigafactory is way more amount of nickel extracted to store this energy. As there's a way to store energy in green hydrogen, for instance. So it's just it doesn't make any sense to tear down the rainforest in Indonesia right now to get access to the nickel to store the solar energy. It makes sense to build, that type of storage in green hydrogen. But then, of course, you cannot put green hydrogen in your cell phone. It doesn't really work. So it's actually to reconsider, our planet as a living organism, very fragile, in a huge crisis right now, where obviously, the climate crisis and the loss of biodiversity and all those systems collapsing, and really think about how far we need to go to still extract finite resources, and what is the trade-off. So because it's hard for consumer, if you feel guilty of everything, you buy your laptop, you buy your cell phone, and you feel guilty, and it's not really up to the consumer, I think, to do this. Is really up to the high level of the finance sector and really the biggest player out there that actually knows what they're doing to the planet for for the benefits of just the few at the end. So it's really to rethink the whole mix of how we produce energy.
And something else your film also talks about is ownership of energy. Who owns energy? Who has the right to say they own energy? So talk about that aspect of the film, because I thought it was a very interesting topic to really integrate into the story, because they're using Indonesia. The people of Indonesia, there's the indigenous people are saying we don't have a right to mine. We don't have a right to destroy the environment to get this resource that we, the people of Indonesia, aren't even really going to be using, because it's been extracted to foreign entities. It's being owned by foreign entities. And then there's people in Papua New Guinea, and the people on the coastal in Pacific Islands, they're like, this is our homeland, this is our culture, but you people from Europe and America and China are claiming ownership for something that we, the people who live here, don't even claim ownership of, because it belongs to Earth, it belongs to nature.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's a very interesting story when it comes to deep seabed mining, because what's happening is what you have in the ocean, the economical zone, the EEZ, 200 nautical miles from every border. So every landmass has a part of the ocean that belongs to the citizen. So of course it depends of where you're from. Indonesian people are much less to say when China is coming that maybe Australian people when it comes to mining their own resources, and there's a lot of tax that then is used to build the school and roads, and so not every country is similar when it comes to extracting their resources. What's happening is after you get out of the EEZ, the economical zone of every country, you enter a space called the international sea, and there's actually a set of rules and regulation called the law of the sea, and the deep sea floor and subfloor is actually about 70% of the planet's surface. And by the law of the sea, and this is an article of the law of the sea, it's not an interpretation, it's an article of the law of the sea. All the seafloor is a common heritage of humankind and should be held in trust for future generations, and no corporations would benefit from it. That's part of the law. So, which makes the whole thing very interesting, because every single citizen, by the law, is actually stakeholder of the deep ocean. So we all have a responsibility actually to step up, step in this debate and ask the question, what's the future of the ocean, what's the future of the deep ocean? And the scale is absolutely enormous. We're talking here every single area that have been given to the contractor, to the country actually, working with contractor to explore for seabed mining is 75,000 square kilometers. The world biggest open pit mine in Chile is 3,500. So and now we have 19 licenses. So if you take the area on the seafloor that is actually in exploration right now for deep seabed mining, we're talking about the landmass of Mongolia.
Yeah,
100% of Mongolia is placed on the seafloor, and that's, they're talking about exploration, and then when we have enough science, we go to extraction. But yet again, this International Seabed Authority, which is this UN instrument, to have this almost like a schizophrenic character, because it has a mandate to protect and exploit at the same time. So that's really by the law. It's built in a very dysfunctional way, because you cannot exploit and protect at the same time. It doesn't really work. So it really depends on who is in charge, what as a delegate, what country. If your prime minister go there, if he's pro deep seabed mining, he might influence the debates and say, look, we need to protect at all costs. Or some will be like, look, we need a nickel and we need to start deep mining as soon as possible. And that's where, I think humanity as a whole, everyone has a say. There's no boundary in the planetary system. What's going to happen in the deep sea floor will impact, the gases in the atmosphere, and we're going to impact the system as a whole. So, it's not just an ocean story. It could trigger drought in Ethiopia. Okay. And that's what I think it's a very rare case where we don't have enough science. Absolutely not. But what we know is that the planetary system are very fragile and they're all interconnected. So it's one of the very rare occasion where every citizen of every country can actually have a voice and make a difference in those negotiations.
But the thing is like, while we all do have a stake in it, while we all do have a voice, we're not given the opportunity to express our thoughts and our opinions, because like I mentioned, like you have these people who have these conglomerates who have these sessions that you show in the film, like where you go into these meetings and these conferences and these handful of people are there making the decisions, and like we, the people who have a stake, who are stakeholders in the earth and in the ocean floor, we don't get the opportunity to say anything until it's too late. The only time we do get an opportunity is like when it's time to protest, and the time to protest is usually as a consequence of these actions, as a consequence of the decisions that these people have made. So we have time for one more question. So, and it's speaking about the consequences of these actions for your film is going to be released in November. What has been the reaction from people who've been able to see it, especially those in the oceanography community and in the environmental communities, and also those in the, I would call them the exploitation, environmental exploitation industries, about this film, because you're revealing conversations in spaces that we don't normally get to see, like these people in these conferences. We don't even know that these conferences are even happening. We don't even know that these meetings are even occurring, that these decisions are being made for us. But what has been the discussions you've been having to people because your film is revealing these discussions that are being held away from
it's a very interesting debate, because on one hand, let's say on the side of the conservation, they feel the film is not eating, it should be more hard eating. I should be more straightforward and portray the deep sea bed miner as the evil capitalist who wants to destroy the planet. I mean, just summarizing. But on the mining side, they think it's too subtle. Like I'm pushing too far from the science perspective. And the point is like, the truth lies in between, in a way that I'm not for deep sea bed mining as an individual, as a director. I'm not for it. But the thing is, there's been so many hard-hitting documentaries that always blame, let's say the miner or the capitalist or whatever the label you want to put on them, and you cannot start a conversation. So what's happening at the end? You preach to the choir, which has been very interesting for me, because with this film, for instance, I was able to show it to, just as an example, to someone like Andrew Forrest in Australia, who is the biggest iron ore miner in Australia and the second biggest iron ore exporter in the world. But because I have this approach, I can start a conversation with the actual people who mine, and the finance sector, and the people who actually make very, very important decisions of the future of the industry. And I think that that was my aim since the beginning, is also to start these debates, but also to be able to include the extractive industry in a debate. Because if you just hurting them hard, like if you do the Greenpeace type of approach, which I absolutely respect, and I think we need them. But then the category is, they put you in a different category. They put you in a activist, tree hugger, hippies that to try to save the planet, but they don't really take you seriously. And what I've been trying to do here, and quite successfully so actually, with the film and the story, is being able to have those conversations also with the industry, and I think that's where we can trigger bigger change.
I agree, because we, the public, we, the regular people, need to be able to see the discussions happening in these rooms, because as you said, there's documentaries that only show the outside perspective, but we need to be able to hear what these people are saying. We need to know their thought process. We need to know what their goals are. We need to know what their plans are, and because they're talking about the deep sea nodules, but then they're also talking about looking at other things to possibly mine, like using the gas, from the underground. There's a word for it, and I'm forgetting, but it's like the caves, and it's kind of like a form of natural gas, but underground. under the ocean, right? And so like we're like, okay, so your film does say they're talking about deep sea nodules, but they're also looking at something else as a potential source as well. And we need to be able to say, you know what, you need to stay from this one. Let us deal with this issue now, and we're going to prevent you from going after this other resource in the future. So I think that's a very important thing that your film does manage to do, and like give us a full 360 perspective of the entire issue. I know you have to go now, but thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Absolutely.
Where will the film be released in November?
So it's going theatrical. It is theatrical now in New York, and going to be in LA, and then through the US, and then sometime I guess early next year, good digital. So we will be widely shared in digital platforms.
Okay, great. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, Matthieu.
Bye bye.
I'm so sorry for my voice too.
It's okay.
Oh my gosh.
No problem at all. Thanks for the interview.
Thank you. Bye.